Hi, good afternoon, good evening to my colleagues and esteemed speakers present here for this comprehensive and thought-provoking event, Aging and Longevity 2025. I thank the organizers, MedGlobal Connect, for inviting me to participate in this important gathering of longevity minds. I'm Dr. Sangeeta Sahi. I'm a general practitioner with credentials in epigenetics, nutrigenomics, psychoneuroendocrinoimmunology, and longevity. I have a hybrid consulting private practice based in London, and I've been teaching globally about mind, body, energy, and integrative medicine for over 25 years. And I've collaborated with quantum physicists in the US and biophysicists in the UK in many studies related to quantum field and bioregulatory effects on cellular interactions and the influences of thoughts, emotions, and behaviors on cellular and magnetic field patterning and resonance. I've also collaborated with studies with ancient healing systems such as Ayurveda, traditional Chinese medicine, and Siddha medicine. So today I'll be presenting a simple but profound interconnected models showing the influences of emotions on healthy and unhealthy aging. So my talk is entitled The Critical Role of Emotional Wellbeing in Healthy Aging and Longevity. So part one is the link between emotional style and longevity, which is robust. Chronic emotional states trigger molecular responses that can either protect or destroy the foundations of our health. And of course, we all know this, but we forget because application is very different from theoretical understanding. So positive emotions create longer life. Increased longevity. Studies suggest that higher levels of subjective well-being, positive emotions like happiness, joy, contentment, and optimism, and life satisfaction are associated with living longer. Physiological benefits. Positive emotions can act as a buffer against stress. They're associated with recovery from cardiovascular disease, lower blood pressure, and a stronger immune system function. The behavioral benefits are obviously happier, more optimistic people are more likely to engage in healthier behaviors, such as regular physical activity, better sleep habits, maintaining social connections, which is also independently linked to longevity. And most importantly, resilience building. Positive emotions are thought to help people build lasting resources, including resilience. Now, these lasting resources are also very economically linked. The more positive you are, the more able you are to go out and actually create more positive financial and economic environments for yourself and your families, which improves the ability to cope effectively with adversity and life challenges. This is highly important right now in our economic recession states. Negative emotions. So negative emotions, physiological wear and tear. Chronic experience of negative emotions such as anger, hostility, stress, and depression can lead to sustained activation of the autonomic nervous system, which can result in chronic stress, increased blood pressure, which strains the heart and increases the risk of coronary artery disease and heart attacks. And the most important thing is increased inflammation or inflammaging, a chronic low-grade inflammation, which is a key driver of age-related diseases, and increased oxidative stress and telomere shortening. Now, telomeres are the caps on the chromosomes that shorten with age, serving as a marker of cellular aging. So this impacts our health. Depression, anxiety, chronic stress are associated with poorer immune function, slower wound healing, and higher rates of mortality. Conscientiousness, this is very important and is very often overlooked. Organizational behavioral traits, i.e. conscientiousness, personality traits are associated with self-control and goal-oriented behavior, and are robustly linked to longevity, often by promoting healthier lifestyle choices. Now, the key research studies that link positive emotions and longevity are the Noon study by Dana Snowden and Friesen. And this longitudinal study analyzed the autobiographies written in early adulthood by 678 Catholic nuns. The results showed a strong association between the density of positive emotional content in the writings, such as joy, love, hope, and longevity 6 decades later. So this was a 6-decade-long study. Nuns who expressed the most positive emotions lived on average 6.9 to 10 years longer than those who expressed the fewest. Longitudinal cohort studies on subjective well-being and mortality, multiple studies, including a 28-year-old follow-up study on the general population, have found that subjective well-being, which is a composite of life satisfaction, positive affect, and low negative affect, significantly predicts longevity. Specifically positive affect. The experience of emotions like joy, interest, and alertness is consistently identified as an independent protective factor against mortality. Optimism and exceptional longevity. Research has shown that optimism is associated with an 11% to 15% longer lifespan and greater odds of achieving exceptional longevity, defined as living to the age of 85 or beyond. So the meta-analysis was done by Chida and Steptoe, and this comprehensive review combined data from multiple prospective studies has found that positive effect and positive dispositions were associated with a significantly reduced risk of mortality in healthy populations, and several meta-analyses focusing on older adults have concluded that individuals with higher levels of positive affect have a lower mortality risk, often reported as a 15 to 25% reduction in all-cause mortality, even after controlling for various confounding factors such as physical health, socio-demographics, and lifestyle. So positive emotions, what is the proposed mechanisms are people with positive outlooks are more likely to engage in health-promoting behaviors and exercise regularly and maintain strong social relationships. And they are also more likely to adhere to medical advice, avoiding risk-generating situations. Positive building resilience, the broaden and build theory, positive emotions help individuals build lasting personal resources and social ties, coping skills, resilience that serve as a buffer against adversity, protecting them from their detrimental health effects and negative life stresses. So aging is a complex process influenced by the interplay between intrinsic and extrinsic factors. And genetics and epigenetics are crucial, and they do not operate in a vacuum. So the role of genetics and epigenetics. Genetics is the hardware. The genes set the baseline potential for your lifespan and health span. They determine the efficiency of your DNA repair mechanisms, antioxidant systems, and cellular maintenance pathways. Epigenetics is the software. This involves changes that affect gene expression without altering the underlying DNA sequencing, DNA methylation, histone modification, and the epigenome is the primary interface between our environment and our genome. So epigenetics is actually, the changes are considered as a core regulator of aging, including the development of the epigenetic clock as a measure of biological age. Because these changes are reversible, they are primary target for anti-aging therapies, such as partial cellular reprogramming, which is fairly new and actually it was found by Yakanama, who is the Japanese founder of partial cellular reprogramming, which I'm going to come to in a second. The critical need to address extrinsic factors. Extrinsic factors are what constantly interact with and modify our epigenome, largely determining whether we reach our genetic potential for longevity. I know this has probably been covered by other colleagues of mine in this conference, but I wish to just reiterate some of the things they may have said. Metabolism and lifestyle, dietary management, caloric restriction, intermittent fasting, a balanced diet, they've all been shown to modulate sirtuin activity and nutrient sensing pathways that directly influence the epigenome. Regular exercise impacts many hallmarks of aging. Oxidative stress and inflammation, there are major drivers of aging, causing damage to DNA, proteins, and lipids. Strategies must address the causes of chronic low-grade inflammation. Sleep. Adequate high-quality sleep is crucial for the clearance of metabolic waste and for the proper maintenance and repair of DNA. Environmental exposure. Reducing exposure to pollutants, UV radiation, sun exposure, and environmental toxins helps minimize the accumulation of DNA damage and stress that accelerates the epigenetic clock. And of course, we come to mental and social health, which is chronic stress. High levels of physiological stress have been directly linked to accelerated biological aging, epigenetic clock acceleration, and telomere shortening. Addressing stress, depression, and social isolation is an anti-aging mechanism. Now, the molecular link between shorter gene stress and emotional resilience. The connection is the genes most critically affected by the aging process are the same ones that are vital for cognitive and emotional function. And the physiological stress is a major accelerator of this underlying damage. So long genes are vulnerable for complex systems. The shift toward gene activity, the gene length imbalance is not random. Research shows that the longest genes are disproportionately affected. The decrease in gene expression as we age is most pronounced in genes with the longest transcripts. The brain is rich in long genes. The nervous system, including the brain regions responsible for complex functions like emotion regulation, memory, and stress response, the prefrontal cortex, the hippocampus, the limbic system, they express some of the longest genes in the human genome. For example, the massive dystrophin gene is expressed in astrocytes, which are support cells in the brain. The implication of this is that the mechanism of aging is specifically disrupting the expression of long genes. It is disproportionately crippling the most complex and long gene-dependent systems in the body, which includes our emotional and cognitive architecture. The stress accelerator, psychological stress is a source of damage. So the gene length imbalance is thought to be caused by the accumulation of DNA damage over time. This is where emotions and stress enter the picture. Stress causes transcriptional damage, the root cause. Chronic psychological stress leads to the release of high levels of stress hormones and inflammaging, which in turn increase oxidative stress and DNA damage in the cells. Long genes are the target. Because DNA damage occurs randomly across the genome, longer genes are simply a bigger target, making them more likely to accumulate damage that physically blocks the cellular machinery from transcribing the gene. So the vicious cycle, chronic unmanaged emotional stress accelerates the very damage that preferentially silences the long genes needed for optimal emotional regulation and stress resilience. This creates a vicious cycle. Stress damages the genes needed to manage stress, accelerating both biological and emotional aging. Now, I'm going to skip a little and come right down to Ayurveda and its effect as a genomic maintenance plan, because this may be something that my other colleagues may not have addressed in this conference. And I think I'll skip right down to that, if I may. So just give me 1 second. Before I skip to that, though, I do want to talk about partial cellular reprogramming, as this is a very new concept and is potentially has a very powerful influence, especially in precision medicine. So partial cellular programming, or PCR, and its connection to emotional health. The connection between emotional health and partial cellular reprogramming is indirect but fundamentally linked through the molecular mechanism of epigenetic aging and stress-induced damage. Emotional health, particularly the management of chronic stress, determines the rate at which your cells age. And PCR is a novel therapeutic strategy which can reverse the specific age-related damage. Chronic negative emotional stress states, as we know, accelerate the aging process at the cellular level. Through a hormonal overload, molecular damage, and epigenetic drift, which is the constant molecular damage causes epigenetic drift, which is a loss of original youthful pattern of gene expression. Pattern is the most important word here. And this is literally what biological aging is at a molecular level. It's an accumulation of noise that disrupts the cell's function and organization. It creates cellular incoherency. In essence, poor emotional health accelerates the accumulation of the epigenetic mistakes that cause cells to become old and dysfunctional. Now, partial cellular reprogramming is the molecular reset. So it's a technological intervention designed to specifically target and reverse this epigenetic drift. The goal is that PCR uses Yamanaka factors, which are small molecules, in a controlled, transient way to reboot the cell's operating system, the epigenome. The action, by briefly activating these factors, the cell's accumulated epigenetic mistakes are partially erased, resetting its biological age to a more youthful state as measured by epigenetic clocks like the Horvath clock. The outcome is the cell's function is restored. Better mitochondrial health, reduced inflammation, restored tissue repair capacity. Now, stress is the accelerator, PCR is the brake. The relationship is one of cause and countermeasure. So while emotional health is a natural preventative measure that slows the accumulation of aging damage, partial cellular reprogramming is an artificial therapeutic measure that intervenes to actively reverse that accumulated damage. Future longevity strategies may involve both managing emotional health to reduce the rate of damage and periodically using reprogramming technologies to reset the biological clock. There is so much more research and so much more I would like to share about this, but there is obviously a constraint on time. So I'm going to jump to part 3, which is Ayurvedic longevity as a genomic maintenance plan. The ancient Indian science of Ayurveda, meaning knowledge of longevity, offers a profound holistic solution to the modern molecular problem of stress-induced aging. Why? Because here at its essence is something called Ojas, which is called vital essence. And the concept of Ojas is Ayurveda's direct measure of fundamental health, vitality, immunity, and resilience. So the modern concept is immunoendocrine health. The Ayurvedic counterpart is Ojas, the ultimate essence of all tissues, foundation of immunity. And the connection is to protect Ojas is the equivalent, is the equivalent of maintaining the integrity and function of the complex long gene-dependent central nervous system, the Maja Dhatu, and immune system. The oxidative transcription, the modern concept is oxidative transcriptional stress, and the Ayurvedic counterpart of that is ama, or metabolic toxins and waste, and the Vata dosha imbalance, which is chaotic, incoherent cellular disruption. Ama and Vata chaos are the root cause of systemic damage or inflammation, inflammaging, and stress. Ojas is depleted by stress and conserved by calmness. So the tripart longevity protocol is Ayurveda provides a 3-step program that acts as a personalized epigenetic and genomic maintenance plan. The first is dinacharya and sadvrita, daily routine and right conduct, daily practices, meditation, pranayama, fixed sleep-wake times, and ethical conduct. The modern genomic effect is minimizing the mind's contribution to biological aging, directly reducing the sustained hypothalamic axis activation, thereby lowering chronic inflammation and oxidative stress, which is the source of DNA damage. Panchakarma is detoxification, periodic cleansing therapies to eliminate accumulated ama, which is toxins and metabolic waste, which reduces the damage, removes the metabolic garbage and noise that partial cellular reprogramming talks about, that promotes chronic inflammation, allowing for a more stable cellular environment and smooth gene transcription. And the third part is rasayana, which is the use of adaptogens and antioxidant herbs, amalaki, ashwagandha, brahmi, and nourishing foods, ghee, almonds, and there's a whole host of other nurturing foods which protect and repair, which are powerful antioxidants, directly neutralizing the reactive oxidation species to prevent DNA damage. Adaptogens like ashwagandha regulate the HPA axis, preserving the long gene-dependent system and helping to retune, as partial cellular reprogramming does, or positively influence gene expression, i.e. epigenetics. So emotional trauma and cellular reprogramming, cutting-edge molecular biology, stress hormone, full reprogramming versus partial reprogramming. So full reprogramming is actually an emotional cellular link to stress hormone hypersensitivity. Skin cells from patients with post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, are reverted to an embryonic-like state, which is induced pluripotent stem cells. When these iPSCs are differentiated into neurons, they show an exaggerated hypersensitive reaction to stress hormones. And the implication for longevity is the physical memory of emotional trauma is not just in the brain. It persists as a cellular signature, and the molecular vulnerability predisposes an individual cells to chronic overactivation and damage from stress. So the epigenetic aging, the partial reprogramming of epigenetic clocks, is the epigenetic aging. Chronic psychological stress is a primary driver of accelerated epigenetic aging. A quantifiable measure of biological aging, often using DNA methylation, high lifetime stress makes an individual's cells biologically older than their chronological age, and the quality of emotional health determines the rate of epigenetic drift. Emotional discipline and practices such as meditation can be viewed as a therapeutic form of partial reprogramming, counteracting the cellular aging driven by chronic stress exposure. So my summary and conclusion is longevity is not just about genetics, it's about managing the epigenetic and transcriptional stress that our emotions impose on our genome. And the problem is chronic stress accelerates the loss of function in the complex long genes necessary for emotional and cognitive resilience. And the solution is prioritizing emotional well-being through both modern stress management and the holistic practices of rasayana directly reduces inflammaging and oxidative stress, thereby preserving genomic stability and slowing the rate of biological aging. Master your emotions, master your genes, and extend your health span. That is the scientific and ancient consensus, very clearly stated. Thank you. Thank you, MedGlobal Connect. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them.